In 1960, a 2-minute blast called Let's Have a Party cracked the American pop charts. It wasn't the version sung by Elvis Presley, though he'd recorded it first. The voice on this version belonged to a young woman from Oklahoma, a singer who growled, squealed, and shouted her way through the song with a ferocity no other woman on the radio quite matched. Her name was Wanda Jackson, and in the years that followed, journalists and fans alike would give her a title that stuck: the Queen of Rockabilly. Wanda LaVon Jackson was born October 20th, 1937, in the small town of Maud, Oklahoma, the only child of Tom and Nellie Jackson. Her father, Tom, had been a country singer and fiddler, working dances around Oklahoma until the Great Depression forced him to quit. When Wanda was 4, he moved the family to Los Angeles, chasing wartime work and a better living. In California, music stayed close. Later interviews and biographies described Tom as both strict and supportive. A father who didn't want his daughter living the rough dance hall life that he had known, but who also recognized her talent early and pushed her to develop it. Wanda listened to country radio and the honky-tonks of wartime California. Artists like Bob Wills, Spade Cooley. When the family moved back to Oklahoma City in 1949, Tom brought that musical ambition with him. By her early teens, he had Wanda practicing guitar, learning harmony parts, and thinking of music not as a hobby, but as a possible way of life. Back in Oklahoma, Wanda enrolled at Capitol Hill High School in Oklahoma City, and soon landed her first serious break, a regular radio program on local station KLPR, where she sang country and western swing live on the air. Listeners heard a teenager with a clear, powerful voice and an ease at the microphone that sounded older than her years. A classmate later remembered, Wanda never had time for dates, just that guitar. That's all she thought about. One night, in 1952, a local star tuned in. Hank Thompson, already a national name in country music. Impressed, he invited Wanda to sing with his band at the Trianon Ballroom in Oklahoma City. That one ballroom appearance led to regular work with regional bands, and soon after to her first record deal with Decca. Rare enough for any teenager, rarer still for a young woman in country music. At 17, Wanda Jackson was still in high school, but she already had a national country hit. After hearing her on KLPR, Texas-born bandleader Hank Thompson brought her into the studio. In 1954, they cut a duet, "You Can't Have My Love," pairing Wanda with Thompson's band singer, Billy Gray. Released on Decca Records, the song climbed to number 8 on the country chart, a remarkable debut for a teenage girl in a field still dominated by men. Wanda wanted to sign with Thompson's label, Capitol, but producer Ken Nelson reportedly told her girls don't sell records, so she signed with Decca instead. Over the next 2 years, she cut around 14 sides for Decca, country love songs, shuffles, and ballads designed to fit the market. The voice is there, bright, strong, with a hint of the girl that would later define her rockabilly work. But the songs and arrangements stay firmly inside the country lane. After graduating high school in 1955, Wanda joined traveling country shows, including tours linked to the Ozark Jubilee and the Hank Snow Jamboree. On one of those package tours, she met a young singer from Memphis who was beginning to cause trouble on southern stages, Elvis Presley. In later interviews, Wanda described first seeing him at a radio station in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, in July of 1955. He wore a yellow sports coat, she remembered, and drove a pink Cadillac, the first she'd ever seen. That night, from the wings, she watched as he walked on stage, started to move, and the girls at the foot of the stage screamed. When they did, Wanda's father thought there was a fire in the building. They wound up sharing bills through 1955 and into 1956, dating off and on when their schedules lined up. Double features at small-town theaters, late-night drives, hamburgers after shows. What mattered most, she later said, wasn't the brief romance. It was what he asked her to do with her music. By late 1955, rock and roll was beginning to overtake the country shows they were playing together. Elvis's sets were getting wilder, the crowds younger. Wanda was still billed as a straight country singer. She wore cowgirl fringe and sang ballads and shuffles. She worried about what would happen if she stepped outside of that. According to a 2017 interview she gave to Fox News, Elvis kept pushing. She said, "The thing that Elvis did for me was giving me the courage to sing this new music, like he was doing. I would tell him, 'I can't do that, Elvis, because I'm just a country singer. Besides, I'm a girl. I can't sing that stuff.' And he said, 'I know you could if you try.' He made me promise that I would try." She kept the promise. In 1956, after her Decca deal ran its course, Wanda signed with Capitol Records, the same label that had once said girls don't sell records. At her very first Capitol session in Los Angeles, she cut a song written especially for her, called "I Gotta Know." It started as a country waltz, and then, mid-verse, suddenly snapped into full-throttle rock and roll.
Well, a hard-headed woman, a soft-hearted man, been a causing trouble ever since the world began, but don't you? Oh yeah, ever since the world began. Woo, yeah. Well, a hard-headed woman is a thorn in the side of a man. Well, Adam said to Eve, "Listen here to me. Don't you let me catch you messing around that apple tree, but don't you? Oh yeah, ever since the world began. Oh, 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 oh. A hard-headed woman is a thorn in the side of a man. You betcha, yeah."
That record marked the moment Wanda Jackson stopped trying to choose between country respectability and rock and roll rebellion, and started doing both at once. I Gotta Know reached number 15 on the Billboard Country chart, enough to prove that listeners were willing to follow a young woman right up to the edge of rock and roll, even if radio stations and label executives still weren't sure how to categorize what she was doing.
Hard-headed woman is a thorn in the side of a man. Well, Samson told Delilah, loud and clear, "Keep your cotton-picking fingers off my curly hair, why don't you? Oh yeah, ever since the world began. Oh, 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 oh. A hard-headed woman is a thorn in the side of a man." Let's go again, yeah.
Once I Gotta Know proved she could walk the line, Wanda started jumping over it. Between 1956 and 1958, she cut a run of rockabilly singles for Capitol that critics now treat as foundational. Critics later compared her whoops and shrieks to Little Richard. But at the time, the industry didn't quite know what to do with that. Radio programmers filed her under country or ignored the rockers. Some of her fiercest singles stalled commercially in the US, even as they became cult favorites abroad. Capitol continued to release both styles, hard-rocking A-sides, country ballads, and later full country LPs, effectively asking her to live two careers at once. In April 1958, during one of her early Capitol sessions in Hollywood, Wanda recorded a song written by Jessie Mae Robinson that Elvis Presley had already cut for the film Loving You. The song was called Let's Have a Party. Capitol first tucked her version away on the self-titled 1958 LP, Wanda Jackson. 2 years later, a disc jockey in Des Moines, Iowa began using it as his theme song. Listeners responded. In 1960, Capitol pulled the track, issued it as a single, and Let's Have a Party finally had its own moment. It gave Wanda her first American pop hit and a solid foothold in Britain. Decades later, the song would show up in films like Dead Poets Society, and in 2024 be inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame, By 1960, Capitol had accumulated a small stack of her wildest sides. That May, the label gathered them on a compilation called Rockin' with Wanda, packaging all the rock songs together for the first time. All Music, later called Rockin' with Wanda, absolutely the best collection of Jackson's rockabilly recordings, and a leading candidate for the best female rock and roll album of the 1950s. The following January, Capitol doubled down with There's a Party Going On. Taken together, the two albums capture Wanda at her rockabilly peak, a woman fronting a ferocious band in an era when most rock and roll LP covers still only showed men. Even as those party records were coming out, Wanda was already shifting again. In October of 1960 at Bradley Studios in Nashville, she recorded a self-penned ballad called Right or Wrong, I'll Be With You, a smoother Nashville sound country song that looked back toward the market she'd started in. Released as a single in April 1961 with the slinky, blues-soaked Funnel of Love on the B-side, it became a major crossover hit, number 9 on the Billboard Country chart, number 29 on the pop chart. Critics would later single out Funnel of Love in particular. Recorded at the same session, it never charted on its own, but its strange mix of country, rock, and blues, and one of Wanda's best recorded vocals, turned it into a cult favorite on reissues and film soundtracks decades later. Later that same year, she recorded In the Middle of a Heartache in Nashville. Released in September of 1961, it would become the biggest chart hit of her career, number 6 on the country chart, and number 27 on the pop Hot 100. It was her final top 40 single and her last top 10 country hit. Looking back years later, Wanda called Right or Wrong a turning point. She recalls, "Then country music began coming back, and I had written a ballad called Right or Wrong, and it became a big hit. I think that when I went back to the country, I lost my rock and roll fans." From the outside, it looked like a classic country success story. Steady chart action, tours, fan clubs, and a move from rock and roll novelty act to established country artist. Inside that life, though, things were changing more profoundly than the sound on her records. In 1961, Wanda married Wendell Goodman, a former IBM salesman she had met years earlier when he was playing in a local band. Unlike some husbands of performers, Goodman didn't ask her to quit. Instead, he quit his own job to manage her career, handle bookings, and travel with her. In interviews, Wanda would later say that his decision was crucial. She believed a marriage could survive the road only if they lived that life together. Through the 1960s, Wanda balanced touring with raising a family. She and Wendell had 2 children, and she's described a life where the kids were often left with relatives while the couple took to the road. In her memoir and later interviews, she talks about the strain, the guilt of being away, the exhaustion of constant travel, and the knowledge that unlike her male colleagues, she was always being judged not just as a performer, but as a wife and mother as well. Wendell's presence helped. He drove, handled the money, shielded her from some of the rougher business, and by her own account, kept the marriage steady through years of honky-tonks, fairgrounds, and television appearances. Her stage clothes got flashier, her hair higher, but at the end of the night, she went back to a tour bus bunk or a motel room shared with her husband, not a separate life in another town. Even as she toured the American country circuit, Wanda's career took an unexpected side road into Europe. In the mid-1960s, she recorded several songs in German for the European market, including Santo Domingo, which reached the top 20 in Germany in 1965, and made her something of a pop star there, years before many of her US fans knew about it. By the end of the 1960s, the grind was catching up. Rock music had shifted toward psychedelia and hard rock. Nashville was chasing smoother, countrypolitan sounds. Wanda's records continued to chart on country radio, but the cultural center of gravity was moving elsewhere. At home, another change was underway. In 1971, after years of what she described as running hard and feeling spiritually empty, Rhonda and Wendell both experienced a religious conversion, becoming devout Christians. She has talked about attending a revival meeting, feeling convicted about her life on the road, and inviting faith into their marriage. The decision would reshape everything: the songs she chose, the venues she played, even how she dressed on stage. In the 1970s, Wanda Jackson, the woman who had once snarled her way through Let's Have a Party, would turn more and more toward gospel and Christian country, even as a new generation of rock and roll fans, especially in Europe, started to rediscover the wild records she'd made as a teenager. Through the late 1970s, Wanda Jackson lived several lives at once. At home in Oklahoma, she was Wanda Goodman, wife, mother, and eventually grandmother, Sunday churchgoer, friend, neighbor. On the road, she became a Christian music artist, singing hymns and gospel country to congregations and church audiences. But the old songs never entirely went away. She still closed her shows with Let's Have a Party or Fujiyama Mama when the setting allowed, and fans would ask for the rockers by name. In one interview, she admitted to being torn at times. Was it right to keep performing songs about wild nights and dangerous lovers when she now saw her music as a form of ministry? The compromise she eventually found was simple: tell the truth about where she'd been, sing the songs that had brought her here, and trust the listeners to understand the entire person. In the 1980s, European labels began reissuing her 1950s and early 60s rock and roll on LP, and later on CDs. Critics and fan writers raved about the records, calling Rockin' with Wanda one of the great rockabilly albums of all time, and dubbing her in print the Queen of Rockabilly. For the second time in her life, Wanda found herself playing to crowds of dancing teenagers. She flew out from Oklahoma, did the shows, and flew home again to a life that revolved around faith, family, and a modest house, with a music room where gold records hung beside family photos. As the 1980s turned into the 1990s, that recognition would continue to grow louder. A young artist named Rosie Flores came to visit Wanda in Oklahoma, bringing stacks of rockabilly reissues and news of a growing American fan base. Their visit turned into a friendship, and in 1995, Wanda appeared on Flores' album Rockabilly Philly. The two women then hit the road together on a 5-week North American tour, playing to crowds that were shockingly young. It was kind of eye-opening, Wanda later recalled. The rooms were a little frightening, but the audiences couldn't have been sweeter. In the mid-90s, she also cut studio albums with Scandinavian band The Alligators, including Let's Have a Party and The Queen of Rockabilly in 1997. In 2003, she cut one of the most striking late-career albums of any 50s rocker, Heart Trouble, a mix of new and recut material featuring guests like Elvis Costello, Dave Alvin, Rosie Flores, and The Cramps. Critics praised the record, noting how much of her old snarl and phrasing she'd kept. One review called it a rock and roll dream, and marveled that as a grandmother, she could still capture most of the snarls and hiccups she did in the old days. In 2005, Wanda Jackson received the National Endowment for the Arts National Heritage Fellowship, the United States' highest honor in folk and traditional arts, one of the first artists to be recognized specifically for a life that bridged country, rockabilly, and gospel. 4 years later, on April 4, 2009, she was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in the Early Influence category. Around this time, a young rock star who had just come off a critically acclaimed album with Loretta Lynn, named Jack White, invited Wanda to record for his Third Man Records label. The result, released in January 2011, was The Party Ain't Over.
road. We're moving and a grooving, gonna set us on my soul. Let's have a party. Woo! Let's have a party. Send it to the store, let's buy some more. Let's have a party tonight. I never kissed a bear, never kissed a goose, but we can shake a chicken in the middle of the room. Let's have a party.
A rockabilly collection of songs produced by White himself. The album pulls material from across the map, songs from Kitty Wells, Eddie Cochran, Bob Dylan, even Amy Winehouse. The Party Ain't Over became her first album ever to chart the Billboard 200, peaking at number 58, and hit number 17 on the top rock albums chart, making her, at that time, the oldest female vocalist to appear there. She promoted it with TV appearances on Letterman and Conan, and even stepped back onto the Grand Ole Opry stage after decades away. Through all of these comebacks and revivals, one constant on the road and at home was Wendell Goodman, her husband since 1961. But on May 21, 2017, after more than 56 years of marriage, Wendell died while traveling with Wanda in Alabama at age 81. The loss was enormous. Yet Wanda kept performing when she could, even as her own health issues mounted. She played a handful of shows in 2018. Then in March 2019, at age 81, she announced her retirement from touring, citing health and safety concerns after a stroke the previous year. Her message to fans was simple. It has been a wild ride. This is not the end, just the beginning of a new chapter. That new chapter included one last trip into the studio. In 2019, before her retirement announcement, Wanda recorded a final set of songs produced by Joan Jett. Released in August of 2021 as Encore, the 8-song album features duets with Joan Jett, Elle King, and Angelina Presley. She called it then her final album, The Last Word, from a woman whose first singles had come out more than 65 years earlier. From Maud, Oklahoma to Capitol Records, from the Honky Tonks to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, from gospel revivals to late-life duets with rock stars half her age, Wanda Jackson's life had been a long, looping line between faith and fire, duty and desire, rock and roll mayhem and country respectability. They called her the Queen of Rockabilly, but across 7 decades, dozens of albums, and one final encore, she also proved something deeper, that a woman with a guitar and a voice like a storm could rewrite the rules, then keep on singing long after the storm had passed. As of this production, Wanda Jackson may have retreated from the public eye, but she will forever be known and remembered as one of rock and roll's great pioneers, one of the first and one of the few women to succeed in rockabilly music. She's a complex story, going from Oklahoma to Germany and back again. She dated Elvis and traded jokes with Little Richard, argued with label men about what she could sing, raised children while chasing charts, walked away from the honky tonks, and then walked back in and proved that she still had what it takes to be the Queen of Rockabilly.
Right or wrong, I'll be with you.